In naval warfare, there exists an unwritten law that every submariner learns on their first day. When a destroyer locks onto your position, you dive deep and pray. You don't fight back. You don't stand your ground. You certainly don't charge directly at the warship specifically designed to kill you. Destroyers are the apex predators of submarine hunters. Armed with depth charges, sonar equipment, and blistering speed, a single destroyer can transform the ocean into a death trap. Their hulls cut through water at 35 knots while submarines crawl at 9. Their listening devices can detect a submarine's propeller from miles away. Their depth charges can crush a submarine's pressure hull like a tin can. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. In 1944, the survival rate for submarines that engaged destroyers in direct combat was effectively 0. The doctrine was carved in stone. If a destroyer finds you, you dive to 400 feet, you rig for silent running, and you pray the depth charges walk past you in the dark. But in June 1944, one man decided the hunters would become the hunted. His name was Commander Samuel David Dealey. And in just 4 days, he didn't just break the rules. He shattered them so completely that the Imperial Japanese Navy would question everything they thought they knew about submarine warfare. What he and his 7 to 9 men accomplished was so audacious, it paralyzed Japan's strategic planning and directly contributed to their most catastrophic naval defeat of the Pacific War. This is the story of the USS Harder, submarine number SS-257, the destroyer killer. To understand what Samuel Dealey did in those 4 legendary days, you first have to understand the man himself. He was 36 years old, a Texan with a quiet demeanor and steady hands. He wore spectacles and spoke softly. He looked more like a schoolteacher than a warrior. But beneath that calm, unassuming exterior was a core of tempered steel, forged under the command of one of the most aggressive submarine captains in U.S. Navy history, William Mush Morton of the USS Wahoo. Dealey had been Morton's executive officer. He'd watched Morton turn the Wahoo into a legend by refusing to play by the old rules. He learned that audacity, timing, and absolute fearlessness were weapons just as lethal as any torpedo in the tube. By the time Dealey took command of USS Harder in 1943, those lessons had crystallized into a personal philosophy. The submarine was not prey. It was a weapon. And weapons don't run. On June 6, 1944, while Allied forces stormed Normandy Beach half a world away, Harder prowled the waters off Tori Tori in the Philippines. Japanese Admiral Ozawa had assembled nearly every operational carrier and battleship Japan possessed in these waters, protected by layers of destroyer escorts. Harder's mission was simple: scout the anchorage, gather intelligence, rescue downed Allied aviators if possible. But when destroyer Minetsuki appeared on the horizon at 0900 hours, zigzagging toward them at attack speed, Dealey saw something else entirely. An opportunity. Every regulation, every survival protocol, every instinct screamed for him to dive deep and evade. Instead, Dealey gave an order that froze his crew in disbelief: steady as she goes. Battle stations torpedo. We're going down his throat. This was the reckless tactic military doctrine said was impossible, the down-the-throat shot. You point your bow directly at the charging destroyer. You fire torpedoes into its face at point-blank range. Then, at the last possible second, you crash dive and pray you pass beneath its keel before it can ram you or drop depth charges directly on your position. If your torpedoes miss, you die. If you dive too late, the destroyer's bow slices your submarine in half. If you dive too early, the destroyer adjusts course and depth charges you into oblivion. At just 1,500 yards, near suicidal range, Harder fired 3 torpedoes directly into Minetsuki's path. 80 seconds later, massive explosions shook the submarine's hull. When the shockwaves subsided, sonar reported the impossible: destroyer breaking up, sir. She's going down. Minetsuki had disintegrated. Every man aboard perished. The submarine that should have been prey had just killed the predator. And Dealey wasn't finished. Over the next 9 to 6 hours, he would execute the most audacious rampage in submarine warfare history, sinking 5 Japanese warships and terrorizing an entire fleet. But this story doesn't end in glory. It ends in the dark waters Dealey made famous, in a final confrontation with the very vessels he'd specialized in destroying. That first kill off Tori Tori wasn't an accident. It was a declaration of intent. Because Dealey hadn't come to these waters just to watch. Before we dive into this story, subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this to life. 1 month earlier, in May 1944, Allied intelligence had identified something that made every admiral in the Pacific sit up straight. Nearly the entire operational strength of the Imperial Japanese Navy was concentrating at Tori Tori in the southern Philippines. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa was assembling his fleet for what Japan believed would be the decisive naval confrontation of the war. If successful, it could turn the tide. If it failed, Japan's navy would be finished. The Japanese thought this massive buildup was hidden, protected by remote geography and rings of destroyer patrols. They were wrong. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of U.S. submarine operations, needed eyes on that fleet. He dispatched 3 submarines to the area. USS Harder drew the most dangerous assignment: slip into the heavily patrolled waters around Tori Tori, conduct reconnaissance on the enemy anchorage, and rescue any downed Allied aviators operating near Borneo. On paper, it was an intelligence mission. Observe, report, evade. Dealey read those orders differently. As Harder submerged and crept toward the Japanese-controlled waters in early June, the crew could feel the tension coiling tighter with every mile. They were entering a sea crawling with destroyers, moving through waters where a single sonar contact meant death. Some men checked and rechecked their equipment with shaking hands. Others sat in silence, writing letters they hoped they'd never need to send. But they also watched their captain. Dealey's calm was infectious. His confidence wasn't bravado, it was calculation. He'd studied these waters. He'd analyzed Japanese patrol patterns. And he'd made a decision his crew sensed but didn't yet fully understand. He wasn't here to hide. He was here to hunt. The destroyers patrolling above didn't know it yet, but the prey had teeth. June 6, 1944. 0900 hours. Harder's lookouts spotted the silhouette cutting through the water toward them. Destroyer Minetsuki, zigzagging at attack speed. Her sonar had found them. Every man aboard knew the playbook. Crash dive to 400 feet. Rig for silent running. Shut down everything except essential systems. Go dark, go quiet, and pray the depth charges walk past you in the black. The diving alarm should have been screaming. Instead, Dealey's voice came through the intercom, calm and deliberate. Battle stations torpedo. Steady as she goes. We're going down his throat. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Down the throat. The tactic that existed only in theory, the maneuver that doctrine called borderline suicidal. You don't charge a destroyer. You don't fire torpedoes into the face of a warship built to kill you. But Dealey's hand was already on the periscope, his voice cutting through the paralysis. Make ready tubes 1, 2, and 3. Flank speed. The crew moved on pure discipline, hands executing orders while minds screamed in protest. Through the periscope, Minetsuki's bow grew larger, closer, a wall of steel thundering toward them at 35 knots. The destroyer's captain believed the submarine was fleeing in panic, running straight into his guns. Range 1,500 yards, the fire control officer reported, voice tight. Dealey's finger hovered over the firing button. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. The submarine shuddered as 3 Mark 14 torpedoes raced from their tubes. Emergency dive. Take her down. 80 seconds felt like 80 years. Then the ocean exploded. The shockwave hit harder like a sledgehammer, throwing men against bulkheads. Light bulbs shattered. The hull groaned. When the violence finally subsided, the sonar operator's voice cut through the ringing silence, barely above a whisper. Destroyer breaking up, sir. Multiple compartments flooding. She's going down. Minetsuki disintegrated in less than 4 minutes. All hands lost. The submarine had just killed the wolf. And the rules of naval warfare would never be the same. June 7, 1944. Japanese naval headquarters at Tori Tori erupted in disbelief. Destroyers didn't lose to submarines. They hunted submarines. They killed submarines. The loss of Minetsuki had to be a fluke, a lucky shot, a mechanical failure, anything but what the evidence suggested. They dispatched destroyer Hayanami with explicit orders. Locate the American submarine and eliminate it. The crew was handpicked, the captain experienced. This time there would be no mistakes. Hada found Hayanami first. At 0915 hours, Dealey's lookouts spotted the destroyer conducting a search pattern 6 miles out. The crew braced for another crash dive, another evasion. Instead, Dealey studied the approach angle and made his calculations. Come left to course 090. Make ready bow tubes. This time, the crew understood. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. This was deliberate. Dealey maneuvered Hada into position with the precision of a chess master, forcing Hayanami into a head-on approach. When the destroyer detected them and charged, Dealey waited until the range closed to 1,800 yards, close enough to see the destroyer's bow wave through the periscope. Fire 1 through 4. 2 torpedoes struck Hayanami amidships. The destroyer erupted in a tower of flame, her magazines detonating in a secondary explosion that sent debris raining across a quarter-mile radius. She sank in under 6 minutes. But this time, Dealey did something that sent ice through Japanese command. He didn't flee. Hada remained in the area, deliberately making enough noise to be detected. The message was unmistakable. I'm not running. I'm waiting. By nightfall on June 7th, panic rippled through the Japanese fleet at Tori Tori. 2 destroyers in 2 days. Same submarine. Same impossible tactic. Headquarters convinced themselves they faced an entire wolfpack operating in coordinated attacks. Admiral Ozawa made a fateful decision. He ordered 6 more destroyers to hunt down this phantom submarine force. The ocean had become a battlefield, and the rules no longer applied. June 8, 1944. Inside Admiral Ozawa's flagship at Tori Tori, the morning briefing descended into chaos. 2 destroyers sunk in 48 hours. Same location. Same aggressive tactics. Japanese naval doctrine had no framework for this. A single submarine couldn't be this bold, this lethal, this persistent. The conclusion seemed obvious. They were facing a coordinated wolfpack, at least 3, possibly 5 American submarines operating in concert. The alternative, that one submarine was actively hunting their hunters, was simply too absurd to consider. Ozawa made a catastrophic decision. He pulled 6 destroyers from fleet protection duty and spread them across a 100-mile search grid. The defensive screen around Japan's most valuable carriers and battleships, already stretched thin, now had gaping holes. All to hunt phantoms. Meanwhile, 40 miles north, Hada was doing exactly what its orders specified, rescuing downed Allied aviators. Dealey had pulled 2 Australian airmen from the water near Borneo, patched their wounds, and radioed their safe recovery. For a few hours, USS Hada was just another submarine on a mercy mission. But Japanese destroyers Tanakays and Urikays were closing in, hunting the submarine force that didn't exist. Their captains had studied the previous attacks, analyzed the torpedo spreads, adjusted their tactics. They moved in coordinated sweeps, sonar pinging methodically, determined not to be caught off guard. By late afternoon on June 8th, the ocean around Tori Tori felt alive with menace. Sonar contacts echoed in every direction. Destroyers crisscrossed invisible search grids. And somewhere in that deadly geometry, Hada moved through the water like a predator circling a herd. Dealey received updated intelligence on the destroyer search pattern. His executive officer suggested they withdraw to safer waters, complete the aviator rescue mission, and report their success. Dealey studied the chart showing Tanakays and Urikays' projected positions. Plot an intercept course, he said quietly. We're not finished here. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Again. June 9th, 0600 hours. Hada's sonar detected not 1 but 3 destroyers moving in coordinated formation, Tanakays, Urikays, and a 3rd escort conducting methodical search patterns. These weren't the overconfident hunters of 2 days ago. They'd learned. No reckless charges. No predictable approaches. Just disciplined, patient geometry designed to trap anything in their net. Dealey studied the tactical plot. Most commanders would have withdrawn. Instead, he saw opportunity in the gaps between their formation. Take her down to periscope depth. Come right to course 270. For the next 90 minutes, Harder played a deadly game of three-dimensional chess. Dealey maneuvered the submarine between the destroyers, using their own sonar interference against them, slipping through blind spots in their search grid. His crew moved in absolute silence, every breath controlled, every footstep calculated. At 0730, Tanakays achieved solid sonar contact and turned hard toward Harder's position. But Dealey had positioned himself perfectly. Tanakays had to approach head-on while the other destroyers were too far to provide immediate support. The destroyer closed at flank speed, her captain determined not to repeat his predecessor's mistakes. But he was already committed to the approach vector. Range 2,000 yards, fire control reported. Dealey waited, periscope up, watching the destroyer's bow fill his view. Every second brought Tanakays closer to effective depth charge range. 1,500 yards. Fire 1 through 6. Harder's entire bow salvo launched in rapid succession. Dealey ordered emergency dive even as the torpedoes raced toward their target. 2 struck Tanakays amidships with devastating precision. The destroyer literally broke in half, both sections sinking within 3 minutes. But now all 3 destroyers knew Harder's exact position. Within seconds, the ocean above exploded as depth charges began raining down. The gauntlet had closed, and Harder was trapped inside. The first depth charge detonated 60 feet above Harder's hull. The concussion felt like a freight train slamming into sheet metal. Light bulbs shattered, raining glass across the control room. Cork insulation peeled from the overhead in chunks. A pipe fitting cracked, spewing a high-pressure mist. Then came the second explosion. And the third. And the fourth. The Japanese destroyers had triangulated Harder's position and were working methodically, walking their depth charges down in a grid pattern designed to crush anything below. Each explosion was closer than the last. Take her to 350 feet, Dealey ordered, voice steady despite the chaos. The depth gauge needle crept past recommended limits. 375 feet. 400. The hull groaned under impossible pressure, metal plates creaking and popping. Men glanced at the overhead, knowing that at any second the ocean could come pouring through in a crushing wall of water. Some crew members wept silently, tears streaming down faces frozen in concentration at their stations. Others whispered prayers. A few maintained stone-calm professionalism, hands moving across controls with mechanical precision even as their world exploded around them. For 6 hours, the depth charges continued. Over 60 explosions. The destroyers above were relentless, patient, determined. They knew their target was down there somewhere, wounded, running out of air and battery power. Dealey studied the temperature readings, searching for salvation. At 1,430 hours, he found it, a thermal layer at 380 feet where warm surface water met colder depths. Sound waves would bend, distorting sonar readings. All ahead dead slow. 2 knots. Absolute silence. Harder crept beneath the thermal layer like a wounded animal seeking cover. Above, the destroyers continued pummeling empty water, their sonar now chasing ghosts. By 1,600 hours, the explosions grew distant. By 1,800, they stopped entirely. Harder survived. Barely. But 7 to 9 men now knew exactly how close death sounds when it's hunting you in the dark. The sinking of 3 destroyers in 4 days did more than damage Japan's naval strength. It shattered their psychological foundation. Admiral Ozawa faced an impossible calculation. If a single submarine, or what he still believed was a wolf pack, could operate this freely in waters supposedly secured by destroyer escorts, then Tori Tori was no longer safe. The anchorage he'd chosen specifically for its protection had become a killing ground. On June 10, 1944, Ozawa made a decision that would echo through the rest of the war. He ordered his entire fleet to depart Tori Tori 10 days ahead of schedule. The consequences cascaded immediately. Supply chains broke down, fuel tankers and ammunition ships hadn't reached their forward positions. Carrier pilots who desperately needed additional training were forced into combat underqualified. Coordination between fleet elements deteriorated as ships scrambled to new positions without proper preparation time. The meticulous planning for Japan's decisive naval confrontation unraveled into improvised chaos. 9 days later, on June 19, 1944, this hasty, disorganized fleet met the U.S. Navy at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. The result was catastrophic. American fighters and anti-aircraft fire slaughtered Japanese aircraft in such lopsided numbers that U.S. pilots dubbed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japan lost 3 carriers, over 600 aircraft, and thousands of irreplaceable veteran pilots. American losses were minimal. Military historians would later recognize the connection. Harde's 4-day rampage had directly destabilized Japan's strategic readiness at the worst possible moment. 1 submarine, 7 to 9 men, and a commander willing to rewrite the rules had shifted the momentum of the Pacific War. Commander Samuel Dealey received the Navy Cross. USS Harder became a legend. Messages poured in from submarine forces across the Pacific, celebrating the destroyer killer. But war doesn't care about legends. And Harder's story had one final chapter left to write. This one written in darkness, pressure, and silence. August 24, 1944. USS Harder departed on its 6th war patrol. Commander Dealey, now celebrated across the Pacific Fleet, returned to the hunting grounds that had made him famous, the waters near the Philippines. But the Japanese had spent 2 months studying every detail of Harder's tactics. They'd analyzed attack patterns, calculated optimal countermaneuvers, and drilled their destroyer escort crews specifically to counter the down-the-throat shot. The hunters had learned from their losses. Near Bataan, Harder detected a convoy protected by destroyer escort CD-22. Dealey saw another opportunity. His crew prepared for another legendary attack. But these weren't the overconfident destroyers of June. When Harder closed for the down-the-throat shot, CD-22's captain recognized the tactic instantly and executed a perfect counter-pattern. 2 more escorts moved into supporting positions with practiced precision. The depth charges were placed with surgical accuracy. No extended chase. No thermal layer to hide beneath. No miraculous escape. Harder's pressure hull imploded at 310 feet. The implosion was instantaneous. So fast the human brain couldn't register what was happening. 7 to 9 men, including Commander Samuel David Dealey, were gone before they could even feel fear. The ocean swallowed the legend in silence. Commander Dealey was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. USS Harder received the Presidential Unit Citation. In 4 days the previous June, they had sunk 5 Japanese warships, paralyzed enemy strategic planning, and contributed directly to Japan's most devastating naval defeat of the war. Harder's name became immortal in submarine warfare doctrine. The destroyer killer entered naval legend as the submarine that proved submarines could fight destroyers and win. But war respects no legends, only tactics, timing, and the cold mathematics of steel, water, and explosive force. Samuel Dealey changed submarine warfare forever. He proved that audacity and precision could overcome impossible odds. And in the end, he paid the price that all warriors know is waiting in the dark. The final depth where even legends cannot return. His legacy remains, carved in naval history, spoken in submarine wardrooms, remembered whenever courage confronts the impossible.